Shalom, shalom. I'd like to start off by giving all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, Kodash. Double honors to the apostles of Great Millstone who rule well in peace, blessing, and safety. To all the Akim out there pushing the truth and sincerity throughout the four corners of the earth. To the sincere believers, you know, may the blessing of Yahweh Hashem Yahushai be on you and your household. This is the brother Hadabia from the GMS Dorado camp, coming back at you with another one. And, when, Jake, you'll first, come into this truth, you'll learn that you're a Hebrew Israelite. You will, learn of the names of the Father, Yahweh, the Son, Yahweh Shai, and it's like realizing that, you know, this way of life isn't forever. You start to learn the precepts, and you start to gain the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. And it's sweet. It feels good. And then the Lord will start to challenge you. And then you realize that this thing, because it says many are called, but few are chosen. And a lot of people are get called into this, but they're not chosen. That the, it, this this bitter, this the truth. It's well, let me just read the precept. So this is Revelation 10:8. And the voice which I heard from heaven spake unto me, and said, Go and take the little book which is open in the hand of the angel which standeth upon the sea and upon the earth. And I went unto the angel, and he said unto him, Give me the little book. And he said unto me, Take it, eat it up, and it shall make thy belly bitter, but it shall be in thy mouth sweet as honey. And that's going into this truth. The knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. When you first, I remember, first, coming into the truth. The Lord, blessing me with the knowledge. Knowing, coming, basically coming back into your true power. Your true, heritage. Because this book, and what it, when I say this book, I mean, the Holy Bible. This is for, it's not for everybody. It's mainly for Jake. So-called Negroes, Latinos, and natives. But when you go a layer deeper than that, the elect, on this side, during this generation, only the elect are going to really grasp, this word, and hold on to it for dear life. So, when you get into that first knowing that that you're a Hebrew Israelite, it's sweet. It feels great. And then you got to deal with that bitterness, where you're going to be challenged. Your integrity is going to be challenged. You got to deal with, demons. You got to deal with, the lust of the flesh. You got to really put, like what they say, practice what you preach. And you got to really put into practice. And a lot of people think, you'll know, once you come into this thing, that everything is just going to be, smooth. It's going to be a cakewalk. But it's really not that. This that's why this, when it goes into, it shall make thy belly bitter, it shall be in thy mouth sweet as honey, because it's like, it's harsh. you know It's tough. It's rough. That's why a lot of people will fall out. They'll start bugging out. They'll start bugging out on different doctrines, or certain things will happen to them in their life that will make them fall out of this truth. You know, verse 10, and I took the little book out of the angel's hand and ate it up, and it was in my mouth sweet as honey. And as soon as I had eaten it, my belly was bitter. And he said unto me, thou must prophesy again before many peoples and nations and tongues and kings. And that's what we're doing. Prophesying right now. Prophesying the downfall of Esau eating, prophesying about the incoming doom that is going to, come upon the world. Mainly Babylon the Great. And it's bitter. The truth is bitter. It's sweet, but it's rough. It's not meant for everybody. Just like the bitter herbs that we partake. When it comes to the time of Passover. You know, when you eat those herbs, it hits your digestive system. It's bitter, but yeah, at the same time, it's good for us. Like onto this truth. You know, um, and yeah, you know that just kind of stood out to me. This precept kind of just stood out to me today, because you'll see. I haven't been in this thing long, but from what you know, what I see going on around, and from what has been told onto us from starting off from our apostles, and elders and big bros on down. A lot of people come into this thing and fall out. That's something that we fear. That's something that we fear, and we pray that the Lord, keeps the spirit on us to just endure. And even though life will be challenging, life can get bitter at sometimes. You know, we understand. We're still in captivity, so you gotta keep prophesying and keep pushing. Until the Lord calls us back. This is Ezekiel 3:1. It says, "Good, the Most High Yahweh said, mortal man, eat this scroll, and go and speak to the people of Israel. So I opened my mouth, and he gave me the scroll to eat. He said, mortal man, eat this scroll that I give you. Fill your stomach with it." That scroll once again goes into this knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. This book. Our apostles always say, you gotta understand everything. And that's what this grace period is all about. You're trying to soak up as much as you can right now, especially because we know the time is short. We know the time is short. We know that this is a grace period that the Lord has blessed us with. I'll read verse 2 again. "So I opened my mouth, and he gave me the scroll to eat, and he said, mortal man, eat this scroll that I give you. Fill your stomach with it. I ate it. It tasted sweet as honey. Then Yahweh said, mortal man, go to the people of Israel and say to them whatever I tell you to say." So we're obtaining that knowledge and wisdom and understanding through the spirit of Yahweh Hashem Shai, the Ruach HaKodesh, and then going out prophesying, making videos, being out there on the highways and hedges, and warning, Jake about what is to come. That is our duty. That is our duty as men of Yahweh Hashem Shai. To tell there's a lot of we speak about repentance, but it's not all sweet. There's a terrible judgment that is going to take place. And And you know, you just you have to be ready. You have to be ready through the Spirit. You know, and this is a warning that's going on, that's going out. This is this is Luke 14 in GNT. You know, it says the cost of being a disciple, because you know Jake will come in. You know, Jake will get in the truth and not realize what they're involved in. You know, not realizing that in order to make it, sacrifices have to be made, changes have to be made. Your pride has to be shut down, and you have to be willing to be humiliated for the sake of for the names of Yahweh Shem Yahushai. You know, um, these, just like a lot of these camps out here, these false prophets out here. They don't. They don't. At the end of the day, they don't got 100% truth. 100% truth is over here at Great Millstone, starting off with our apostles and elders. And they always go into eating the whole roll. You gotta you can't just be talking about salvation, and not talk about the coming the destruction. You can't be talking about repentance and not going to the MOTB. You can't be talking about faith and not be talking about being patient and not losing that integrity. You gotta you gotta go into everything. And that's what a lot of these false prophets out here, they ain't doing. And that's why a lot of Jake that come to this thing, they're not understanding what they're involved in. They're not counting the cost. They're not you know really they're not they just think it's all sweet. you know they think it's sweet. They feel like that they belong to something, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that, but it comes with so much more. you know and it comes with a big responsibility, and a great duty. Once when you put your hand to the plow and you decide, what, this is what you're going to do. So verse 25, um, Luke 14, yeah, Luke 14 verse 25 in the GNT. Once, when large crowds of people were going along with Yahushua, he turned and said to them, "Those who come to me cannot be my disciples unless they love me more than they love the father and mother, wife and children, mothers, sisters, and themselves as well." You know, this is the bitter. This is part of that bitter. That bitterness is truth. You got to realize, Yahushua comes first. And that's a that's a turnoff to Jake. You know, they see it as the Lord, quote unquote, being selfish. He has every right to be. He's a jealous power. He has delivered us out of so much hell. He has forgiven us for so much wickedness. That's why he has to come first. Those who do not carry their own cross and come unto me cannot be my disciples. If one of you is planning to build a tower, you sit down first and figure out what it costs and see if you have enough money to finish the job. And me being in construction, I can visualize this precept, down to the very details, because I see what goes into a project being built, $1 billion projects, and every little thing that goes. I've also seen, projects that a lot of money goes into it and then it doesn't finish, or the blueprint gets changed. You know, this is like onto us in in this truth, and following after Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. You know, you know you gain this knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. It's sweet at first, but then you gotta really take into account, what comes with it, you know, and it comes with a lot of hurdles. Every brother can back that point up where, you know, you coming with that hot that zeal, you're on fire, telling everyone, about this truth, and then you gotta learn to you gotta learn how to maneuver correctly, out here, and understand that in order to endure until the end, you gotta understand what you're involved in and understand what it's gonna take in order to get to the end. You know, so that that goes into counting the costs, and one of those costs is you know putting you know putting things behind us, you know, and not having it in the front, whether that's your family, job, money, whatever it is that you held to a that you held to that you put on a pedestal, you know, that meant the world to you. Once you get into this truth, Yahweh Shai then becomes that priority, and serving him becomes a priority. You know, doing the lessons, being out there, it's priority. It's priority number one, and that goes into counting the cost. You know, not denying this flesh, denying what this flesh wants, and choosing to serve and put Yahweh Shai first. Verse 29: If you don't, you will not be able to finish the tower. So you ain't gonna be able to finish this race. You ain't gonna be to finish this work as being a prophet. You know, if you don't, you will not be able to finish the tower after laying the foundation, and all will see what happened will make fun of you. And we see that. You'll see people come and go in this truth. They'll come and go. You begin to build, but you cannot finish the job. They will say, if a king goes out with 10,000 men to fight another king who comes against him with 20,000 men, he will sit down first and decide if he is strong enough to face the other king. And if he isn't, he will send messengers to meet the other king to ask of terms of peace while he's still a long way off. In the same way, you concluded, Yahweh Shai, none of you can be my disciples. None of you can be my disciples unless you give up everything you have. And that's what you have to do. And that's the bitter truth to this walk that a lot of Jake can't accept, is giving up everything. You know, you realize what you realize. You learn the names. You start to gain some knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. But then you still want to do your own thing. You still want to put your desires and needs and wants in the forefront, and you just can't do that. When you start to do that, it's just a snowball effect, and you could fall out. You could stumble. Very bad, and not be able to get back up, and continue this race. And it's a very dangerous thing. It's a very dangerous thing, and that's why for me, especially when it comes to doing the videos, sometimes